You didn't vote for it. Nobody did. But right now, it's taking money out of your pocket. Legally, quietly, and with the full blessing of the government. It doesn't show up on your tax return. There's no line item for it. Your employer doesn't deduct it from your paycheck. And yet, every single year, it transfers wealth away from ordinary people and towards something much larger than any of us. It's called inflation. And the moment you understand how it actually works, not the textbook version, not the politician's version, you won't be able to unsee it. Let's start with a number. In 1971, the average American house cost around $30,000. Today, that same house costs closer to $400,000. That's not because houses got 13 times better. The rooms didn't get bigger. The walls didn't get smarter. The neighborhood didn't change. What changed was the money. And here's the uncomfortable part. That change was not accidental. It was a decision, a quiet policy choice made by people who understood exactly what they were doing, and who were counting on the rest of us not to notice. To understand what's really happening, you need to go back to August 15, 1971. That was the day Richard Nixon went on national television and said something that most Americans didn't fully understand at the time. He announced that the United States would no longer allow foreign governments to convert their dollars into gold. This was a massive, civilization-scale economic decision, and it was framed as a temporary measure to protect the American economy. That was over 50 years ago. The temporary measure is still in place. Before 1971, the dollar was tied to gold. The U.S. government had promised that for every $35 in circulation, there was 1 ounce of gold sitting in a vault somewhere. That promise meant money had a physical limit. You couldn't just print more of it without having more gold. After 1971, that constraint disappeared, and governments around the world followed suit almost immediately. Now, money is backed by nothing except trust. Trust in the government, trust in the institution, trust that the dollar you hold today will still mean something tomorrow. That trust is maintained, in part, by managing something very carefully: the supply of money. Here's where it gets interesting. Most people think inflation is caused by prices going up, but that's backwards. Prices go up because the supply of money goes up. When there are more dollars chasing the same amount of goods, each dollar is worth a little less than it was before. Sellers naturally adjust their prices to reflect that. Think of it this way. Imagine a small town with 10 people and 10 apples. Each apple costs $1, because that's how much money each person has. Now imagine someone secretly doubles the amount of money in the town overnight, but the number of apples stays the same. The apples don't cost $1 anymore. They cost $2. The apple didn't change. The money did. This is inflation, not a mystery, not an accident, a mathematical outcome of expanding the money supply faster than the economy grows. And here's the critical question: who expands the money supply? The answer is governments and central banks, which means inflation is, at its core, a policy tool, and like every policy tool, it has winners and losers. Let's talk about who wins. When a government is drowning in debt, and most modern governments are, inflation is quietly one of the most powerful ways to deal with it. Here's why. Say a government owes $1 trillion in debt. The debt is fixed. The number doesn't change. But if inflation runs at 6% a year, the real value of that debt shrinks by 6% every year. Even as the number stays the same on paper, the government pays back debt with dollars that are worth less than the dollars it originally borrowed. That's a transfer of wealth from the people who lent the money, bondholders, savers, pension funds, ordinary citizens, to the government that owes it. Nobody voted for this arrangement. Nobody agreed to it. It happens automatically, structurally, and in plain sight, hidden only by its own complexity. And this is why economists sometimes call inflation a tax. Not metaphorically, functionally. It extracts purchasing power from the population without requiring a vote, without requiring legislation, and without appearing on any official tax schedule. Now let's talk about who loses. If you keep your savings in a bank account earning 1% interest, and inflation is running at 4%, you are losing 3% of your real wealth every single year. Not losing it to bad investments, not losing it to a stock market crash, just losing it. Quietly, gradually, the number in your account stays the same. But what that number can actually buy keeps shrinking. This hits hardest on people who have no choice but to keep cash. People who can't afford to invest. People living paycheck to paycheck. People who don't own assets. People who were told that saving money was the responsible thing to do. Saving money in an inflationary system is financially punished. Meanwhile, people who own assets, real estate, stocks, businesses, watch those assets inflate in nominal value right alongside the money supply. A stock that was worth $100 in 2010 might be worth $400 today. Some of that is genuine growth, but some of it is just the mirror image of dollar devaluation. The asset didn't quadruple in value. The dollar just became worth a quarter of what it was. This dynamic, assets going up while cash savings zeroed, is one of the most powerful engines of wealth inequality in the modern world, and it runs on autopilot. Let's zoom into the last few years, because the numbers become almost absurd. Between 2020 and 2022, the US money supply, a measure called M2, grew by roughly 40% in under 2 years. 40%, that's the equivalent of printing $4 for every 10 that previously existed. The stated reason was the pandemic. The economy was in free fall. People needed support, and that is genuinely true. The support was genuinely needed, but what happened next was almost perfectly predictable to anyone watching the money supply. By 2022, inflation in the United States had hit 8.5%, the highest in more than 40 years. Grocery bills surged, rent spiked, energy costs climbed. Every ordinary person felt it in their daily life. And the official response: surprise, confusion, a search for external culprits, supply chains, the war in Ukraine, corporate greed. Some of those factors were real, but the mathematical foundation had been laid 2 years earlier. The moment that 40% expansion happened, you can expand the money supply by 40%, or you can have stable prices. You cannot always have both. Here's the part that doesn't get talked about enough. The people making these decisions, central bankers, treasury officials, government economists, are not incompetent. They understand exactly what they're doing. They understand that expanding the money supply creates inflation. They weigh the short-term benefits against the long-term costs and make a call. Sometimes the call is justified. A pandemic, a financial crisis, a war. There are moments when injecting money into the system is the least bad option available. Nobody serious is arguing that monetary policy should never be used. The problem is the asymmetry of information. The decision gets made in a room by unelected officials. The consequences get distributed across 300 million people who didn't know the decision was happening, don't understand how it works, and have no mechanism to opt out. You can vote against a tax increase. You can vote against a new spending bill. You cannot vote against monetary expansion. That's the quiet part. That's the part that makes inflation structurally different from every other form of taxation. So why doesn't anyone talk about it this directly? Because the complexity is the camouflage. Most people's eyes glaze over when you say monetary policy or empty money supply or real versus nominal returns. The language itself creates distance. It makes the topic feel like something for experts, something far removed from the question of why your grocery bill went up $20 last month. But those are the same thing. The abstract language and the concrete grocery bill are directly connected. The complexity is not a neutral feature. For the people who benefit from the system, the complexity is a feature, not a bug. Understanding this doesn't require a finance degree. It requires a willingness to follow the logic one step at a time. More money printed means each dollar worth less. Less valuable dollar means higher prices. Higher prices means your paycheck, your savings, your cash, all quietly reduced in real power, and the people holding assets, owning property, invested in markets, they float upward as everything reprices around them. Follow the money long enough and it's not confusing at all. It's almost elegant, in a deeply unsettling way. Here's where we land. Inflation, when it's mild and stable, can be a sign of a functioning economy. Most central banks target around 2% per year. There's a genuine logic to that. Mild inflation discourages hoarding, encourages investment, keeps the economic gears turning. But the mechanism by which inflation is created is a political and financial instrument that operates almost entirely outside democratic accountability. Its costs are concentrated in the people least equipped to absorb them. Its benefits flow most naturally to those who already hold wealth, and the name it gets called, inflation, is deliberately neutral, clinical. It sounds like weather, something that just happens, something nobody caused, but somebody always causes it, and somebody always pays for it. The next time you hear a politician promise to fight inflation, to bring prices back down, to restore stability, to protect the working family, ask yourself one quiet question. If the government can create inflation by expanding the money supply, and the government is the same institution promising to fight inflation, then who exactly is protecting you from the protection? That's not a rhetorical question. It's the most important financial question of the last 100 years, and we're still waiting for an honest answer.